Um, I guess my background, if I was to look back at the past 30 years of the web, have always had something to do with community building. Um, I mean, I remember the AOL CDs. I remember having a modem at home and having to dial into BBSs. I remember when Google became a thing, and I think that the challenge of the past couple of decades has really been where does the human fit into the technological circle? And so, in the course of donating 20,000 hours of my time to public service in various organizations around the world, I think the common denominator there is really finding ways to improve the resilience of community organizations by empowering people to support each other. And it sounds like a stupid hack, but if you've been around the open source community, you know that people kind of live sometimes in a vacuum. And by reinforcing human relationships and making people accountable to other people, it sort of is a way to generate um, larger, more resilient communities. And I think, coming from a classically trained arts background, but moving into the media arts and then designing and developing and building things has always kind of been at the core of my passion, whether I'm on stream explaining something or writing up a product description or um, building a staircase, like for me, it's always about that human element, the human interface, the way that we interact with our physical, digital, virtual, interpersonal worlds is always something that's interested me a lot. I mean, going back to the touch point of how we interact with the world, Tauri came into being around the time where a friend of mine and I, Lucas, co-creator of Tauri, where we were ultimately frustrated with this kind of free real estate approach that web tech had started leveraging with, Atom Shell and Electron, and we wanted to find a more um, efficient way to do things. And every device has something called a web view, which is basically like a stripped down web browser, and it's on all the platforms. And so we thought, well, we don't have to ship a browser with every version of every app. How can we do that? And so, along the lines of the frustration of pre-ECMAScript 2020 JavaScript problems, like this was 2019, and it was just really hard to get great performance out of JavaScript and single threading, and so we started looking at other programming languages, and I think I made the first version of Tauri in C++. Lucas made one in Go. We were using a library from an open source contributor. His name is zSerge. It was the WebView library written in everything, like Objective C, and there was a little bit of C++, and you could bind to it with Go. And then someone else made a fork, Buskup made a fork of WebView RS, and we tried that out, and we were like, we love pain. No, we it, Rust was probably the biggest learning curve for us because it really made us change the way we thought of doing things. I guess, like, if you've only ever worked in JavaScript, you're kind of like on a perpetual marathon. Like, you never know when you're done. What is the definition of done of JavaScript? It doesn't have an error in the console, and I think what Rust got us to think about from the very beginning, and it's something we also present to our larger community, is that it's okay to have something that's done, and like the Rust compiler forces you to be done all the time. If your project doesn't compile, it's broken, and if it's broken, it can't be done. And this whole notion of being done every day, you close out your day of work and you're done because you compiled, you push your code up to the CI and it builds and the tests run and you're like, nice, I accomplished something. I finished something. Whereas with JavaScript, you have Sentry and you catch an error and you're like, gosh, I got 10 million of these yesterday. What's going on? I have a try catch loop finally. And like JavaScript expects failure and Rust demands perfection. And that kind of mentality is where Tauri came from. And what we've learned over the past 5 years is that it's very low barrier to entry means if you can install Node.js and you can install a tool chain in your computer, you know what a terminal is, you know how to use the command line, you're going to be fine, right? Like you don't need to write a single line of Rust today to build a Tauri app. And indeed, as you progress and you build things that are more complicated, you already have this kind of cushion, this like friendly place. You have a Rust compiler that's going to tell you what you're doing wrong. You have an amazing community that's going to help you when you get stuck. And I think that, even something that the Rust community recognizes us for is the ease with which people can slowly get used to becoming Rust engineers. And I mean, if the recent history of Google and Microsoft and Facebook and everybody else moving over to the Rust programming language. Geez, I think even Joe Biden made a directive that said use type-safe languages, right? Knowing Rust is job security. If you mean front-end frameworks, I think Tauri is used very efficiently. I mean, like if we step back for a second and think about the tribalism of the front end communities, like if you're an Angular dev, would you go to a React conference? Maybe not publicly, right? Like if you hate on Svelte in a talk, you better believe someone in that audience is going to be like, "What do you mean Svelte's the best thing ever?" Right? And I think everybody has their experiences and their use cases and architectural debt. But at Tauri, in our community, we don't care. Hey, you're using a front end framework. Nice. Do you have to with Tauri? No, you can build a tray app and you're still our friends, right? Do we have favorite frameworks? No. Nothing that we would say this is the blessed way to build front ends because we're trying to be agnostic. And the big thing today in front end is you want type safety everywhere, right? You want it in your UI, you want it on your server, you want it in your app. And to that extent, there are even a couple projects that help you enforce type safety across the boundary between the core of your Tauri app, which is, of course, mostly probably entirely in Rust, and the front end of your user interface, which is something that transpiles down to JavaScript or WASM or whatever. But you want to make sure you have that type safety while you're building because type safety reduces these kinds of human errors that you can make, right? It's a great way to check your types and make sure that you're using the structures in the way that you're expecting to use them, right? But with Tauri, you don't even have to write a line of JavaScript. Really, there's projects like You and Dominator and a bunch of other ones that are reactive user interface frameworks that are entirely written in Rust, which gives you a lot of power because you can maintain type safety entirely within a Rust file, which means you're not traversing boundaries anymore. You know what's going on all the time because the Rust compiler is very fiercely going to contest with you if you try to break things. You can't. And I guess like the new gen of front end is also interesting. I mean, people are using HTMX. They're rolling their own web components. They're interacting with server-side rendered content and pulling that live into their app. They're building things with Phoenix channels from the Elixir framework, if you're aware of that one. And basically, gosh, there's people who are building games that have a WebGL base layer, and then they're positioning and placing transparent HTML web views on top of that game layer for the Bevy ecosystem. And as soon as you're thinking about games, you realize, well, gosh, this could actually be on game consoles. And there are people working on getting this ported over to Xbox. Um, and and I think that the notion of a front end today, from our perspective, is the thing your user interacts with, and it's maybe it's a phone, maybe it's a desktop, maybe it's even your Apple Vision Pro kit. And our job as framework engineers is to get out of your way and to enable you to do that and to say, hey, you're doing great and we're here to help you and we want to make sure that you're successful, regardless of whether or not your backend is written in PHP or you're using CGI Perl or if you've got the latest, greatest Next.js. Or you're so security conscious that you ship and bundle everything inside that app. It's um, it's all the same to us. We want you to succeed. So what we can expect in 2024 is that Tauri 2.0 is going to be released with a complete security audit that shows that it is capable of being used for any purpose on the desktop and mobile environments. Basically ready to go this summer. Probably around the time of my talk, we'll be making the announcement. And at that talk, we'll be updating on a lot of the features that Tauri 2.0 brings and that its partners are offering. So stay tuned for that one. I guess when I think about my largest passion as a developer, I like to put myself in other people's shoes. I guess the this old saying of what is the job to be done, I like to think kind of backwards from that. Instead of, oh, this is a great interface, what can we do with it? I like to think about, you know, the the structure by which people use tools to get things accomplished that they want to do. I guess the old example of nobody buys a drill because they want a drill. They buy a drill so they can put a photograph up on the wall of their grandkids. Like the thing they want to do is put that picture up of their grandkids. No, they want to remember their grandkids. They want to look at their grandkids when their grandkids aren't there. Everything else falls back from that. And I love that kind of product thinking because what it allows me to do as an engineer and a developer is to really find that first principle, which is the human, the user. Maybe someday the synthetic AI agent is going to be the optimal user for some jobs to be done. But nevertheless, I think that the utility of thinking about what people actually want to accomplish really helps me reduce complexity and really solve those problems, right? I recently tried out what is it D0? Wait, what's it called again? For Vercel, V0. Excuse me. So how do I envision the future of web development? I recently tried out V0. It's intriguing. I know there's Devon out there. I know that there's a lot of people worried about losing their jobs. I can tell you, I am tired of seeing posts on LinkedIn where it's an AI generated image and nobody put any thought into it. It probably cost the equivalent of 300 liters of water for that one image that nobody cares about. And I think that points to where I think the web is going. I think that what we're going to see is a return to this kind of craftspersonship that is not something an AI can just accomplish, right? I think that humans are going to stay in the loop because as good as AGI gets or LLMs get, they're going to have their own separate preferences. I don't know. I think that designing for humans is something that humans have to keep on doing. Building for humans is going to stay relevant. I think where tooling like Copilot and Cody are helpful, it's like the type checker for Rust. They help you remember things. They help you understand how things get put together. And heck, maybe they take out a lot of the busy work. Like generated code is boring and no human likes writing it, but it is spec compliant. So I think that what we're going to see is more craftspersonship, like I was saying, but also more um, spec-driven development from the perspective of this is what we want to accomplish. How do we accomplish that? These are the business logic pieces, and the busy work is going to be taken away out of it. I mean, like nobody transpiles TypeScript to JavaScript by hand. Why? No, there's a machine for that. We use transpilers. We used to use Babel, and now whatever. There's tons of ways to solve that problem. And I think that, you know, AI is just another tool in our tool belt. It does not remove us from the equation as creative people involved in designing the world we want to live in.